All right, good evening. This is Wednesday Night Bible Study. I'm eventually going to post some of these on YouTube. I've been so busy with doing the affairs of this life, unfortunately. It's how it goes. I haven't had time to post them, but maybe this weekend, if I get a few minutes, I will be posting these sermons on there. So we're in the book of Matthew, chapter number 5. We are going to be over in verse number, I think we're starting, roughly around number 20, I think we were saying. Last week we went through 17 through 19. We talked about the light shining before men. We talked about this issue of the light. There's so many things to go over, but keep in mind, again, the contract and covenant of the law, which is in full force and effect. And again, that's why we're saying in verse number 19, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men also, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. So showing you an order of importance or an order of basically priority or preeminence. Some are more and some are less, right? Some are called the greatest, as it says here, but whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So there is an order. Of course there is, right? There's an order based upon what? There's order based upon reward. So if you read back over in Matthew 5 and verse number 12, when it's talking about the persecution that they experience, he says, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Make it very clear that this is not like, today you get the participation award and everybody's a winner. That's not how it works. The dispensation of grace is the same way. Not everybody's a winner, right? But how is that? I thought we were all complete in him. Oh, that's really true. We are complete in him. But if you look at the book of Colossians, he says that we may do what? That we may, go look at that just for a second. To make a comparison, look what he says in Colossians chapter number 2. Well, 1 first, and then we'll go to 2. Colossians chapter number 1. He says in 1 and verse number 20, he says, and having made peace through the blood of his cross, by him to reconcile all things unto himself, by him I say, whether they be things in heaven or things in earth, and you that were sometimes alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled in the body of his flesh through death, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight, if, and there's the big if context as to how you can be holy and blameable and reprovable in his sight. So there is reproof that can take place at the judgment seat of Christ. There's no doubt. It's not like you're going to go to the judgment seat of Christ and it's all going to just be, great. No, what does he say? Paul makes it very clear that he shall do what? He shall suffer loss, right? So that loss is a loss of what? A loss of reward. So he says here, so if you continue in the faith, grounded and settled, and be not moved away from the hope of the gospel, which ye have heard, and which is preached to every creature which is under heaven, whereof I, Paul, am made a minister. I like how it goes on in verse number 28. Again says, whom we preach. This is, of course, Jesus Christ and the message of the mystery of the glory of the Gentiles, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom that we what? That we may present. So may present means what? It's perhaps. There's a choice that could happen. Some will be presented, but what's also going to likely happen? Well, as we know, there's going to be many that will not be presented perfect, right? And he says, we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus. So the concept of presenting some men perfect and some men not is there. The same thing is shown right here in Matthew chapter 5. Again, if you read, he says, you'll be called the least in the kingdom of heaven versus called the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and that they will suffer reward in heaven. Well, heaven is talking about what? Well, the heaven there is talking about heaven on earth. They're talking about the kingdom of heaven. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. So heaven is come unto them, and that's why he says in Matthew 4:17, from the very beginning of the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ, it's repent and believe, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? So if the kingdom of heaven's there, what is there? Heaven's there, right? And the kingdom of heaven is there. Heaven is there on earth. Makes pretty easy sense to me. So this understanding of who's doing what and what people are doing is Jesus Christ as being a minister to that circumcision to do what? To confirm the promises made unto the fathers concerning them. As Peter says, it was needful that the word of God, as Paul says, it was needful. Peter says that, unto you first, all that issue of this fulfillment of prophecy. And when Christ is saying in verse number 19, whosoever there shall break one of these least commandments, well, remember, these commandments are the law. Is the law in full force and effect while they're there? Well, yes. Isn't it? Yes. And so could he just say, oh, the law doesn't matter anymore? Christ is here. I've heard a lot of people use the verse in the book of John. Look at John 1. So people say, well, see, look, John 1 says that grace and truth came by Jesus Christ and the law was given to Moses. Well, yeah, that's really true. Read it again. John 1 and verse number 17, it says, "For the law was given by Moses." Is that a true statement? Yeah, who got the law? Israel got the law. It was given by who? Given by Moses. And so the law given by Moses is a true statement. Now, what does the next part of the verse say? It says, "But grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." Is grace demonstrated right here in Matthew chapter number 5? Well, yes. How is that? That he does not kill the disobedient and gainsaying people of Israel, which he's in full right to do. Why? Because they're in violation of the law. Is he being gracious to them? Yes. Is he giving them that another opportunity to be the light? Yes. Is he giving that another opportunity to be ye are the salt of the earth, right? A candlestick shouldn't be put underneath a bushel. No. So what he's making very clear here is that grace did come, but more importantly, what came by Jesus Christ? Truth, right? And we've been using that verse in the book of John. I know we've been looking at it. If you want to look at it, let me go back to it. Where was I at here? Now I won't find it because I always do this. Verily, verily, I say to you. Hold on. I'm getting it. No, I thought it was on the left side. Anyways, we've been talking about the verse where he says, if you continue in my word, you're my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, right? So that verse, if somebody wants to look that up, that'd be great. I'm trying to remember that exact passage. I thought it was John 10. It might still be John 10. I'm sorry, it's John 8. John 8. So John 8, verse number 31, he says, Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him. So again, this was this understanding that they did believe on him, right? Now, what was the next step? It's that maturity step. The next step is what? The next step is gaining edification, understanding what the truth is. So just because you believe the gospel, it's one part of the truth, doesn't mean you understand all the truth, is it? So when you believe the gospel of the grace of God today, do you understand everything about the dispensation of the grace of God, the revelation of the mystery? Do you understand who the Apostle Paul is, all the No. You have to be taught that, right? So that's why he says here in verse 31, if you continue in my word, and who is he making a distinction between? Whose word? He's making a distinction between the Pharisees' word, which they've been, talking, and whose word? And the word of Jesus Christ. So he says right here, verse number 31, if you continue my word, then ye are my disciples indeed, and what? And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Jesus Christ wants all men to do what in the kingdom gospel as he does in the dispensation of the grace of God? All men to be saved and all men to do what? Come to the knowledge of the truth. Doesn't change. He wants people to know the truth. There's no doubt he wants people to know the truth, right? Today it's really hard for people to know the truth. Why? Facebook. I read a Facebook post the other day. It said, did you ever think that reasonable, intelligent people can have discussions in which we leave the discussion in which both parties are right? I'm like, what? So I read the post in a little more detail, and he says, too many of you go into a discussion with somebody without an open mind, and you won't look and see the other side. Well, you should always look at the other side. There's no doubt about that. You should have an open mind in some regards, but you should have a closed mind on things that are absolutes, right? And you shouldn't waver on those things. Having an open mind means that what? You're open for persuasion. Are you open for persuasion in relation to the gospel? Are you? Are you open for persuasion? Are you ready to go? Anybody wants to say, did you get water baptized? I mean, because I can show you some verses that really make it look like you got to get water baptized. If you don't get water baptized, you're going to hell. Did you get water baptized for the remission of sins? Then your sins aren't remitted. Are you open for a discussion on those points? Well, the truth of what people are having trouble with is the idea of truth and the idea of absolute truth. And I've noticed it more when people are removing themselves from Scripture as being a source of truth, right? Well, you can't really say that, right? Well, if two people have a discussion about theology and they say, God said this, and then the other person says, no, God said that, and they're two different things, can God say both of those things? Well, no. So is one right and one wrong? Well, yes, but that's not really what we're looking at. We're not looking at whether or not somebody's right and somebody's wrong. What we should be looking at is what does God actually say, right? Take away the discussion between you and who's going to be right. Who cares about that? I don't care about that. Who's right and who's wrong? If I'm wrong about something, please, let's go have a discussion. Let's sit down. Let's open the scripture. Let's look at it in context and let me be reproved. Why? Because a wise man receiveth rebuke and reproof. What does a fool do? A fool scoffs. A fool laughs and says, "Oh, that's too stupid. You don't know what you're talking about." And that's kind of what subjective relativism is. This what we consider postmodern thought movement that we live in today. It's what you see with the death of Robin Williams. A bunch of people being a bunch of idiots. A bunch of nonsense. Genie, you're now free. Just so you know, 1.78 people die every second. Oh, that's like 5 people. That's 10 people. That's 8 people. That's 12 people. That's 15 people. Think about how many people are dying, right? Why is it that all of a sudden Robin Williams gets some extra credibility? Because he made some stupid movies? I mean, pop culture in America, I mean, does somebody in India, know who Robin Williams is? Maybe, maybe not. Does it really matter that Robin Williams hung himself? I mean, a lot of people do that. What does it prove to you? It proves to you the statement of Jim Carrey, another really wealthy comedian, who says, "Look, I wish everybody was as wealthy as I was, so you could all see that it's not all it's cracked up to be." And I, again, reiterate that point. Either way, Matt Walsh, you guys know who Matt Walsh is, famous blogger. He made the big post today saying, again, he didn't kill himself, or he didn't... it wasn't, mental illness or whatever. He chose to die. And that's very true. It is very, very true. But what is it? It's hard to swallow. You make a choice. Your choice is to do what? Your choice is to kill yourself. Your choice is to put something around your neck and hang yourself. Okay? And my friend said it really good. A pastor friend of mine said, well, hold on. So you're telling me that it's a choice to kill your child and be pro-choice? Right? Right? Follow me here. But killing yourself isn't pro-choice? It's not a choice to kill yourself? You don't understand mental illness. See, I do understand mental illness. I've had mental illness. Most of you guys know some of my story. I can tell you that I have taken antidepressants. I'll go on the record and tell you I have. But let me tell you this. I did it at a point in time in my life in which I hit rock bottom from being so sick. And did it for a short period of time, which didn't really benefit me. Did it to get through exams while I was in law school. While I was, again, incredibly ill. And remember I've told this story to some of you guys, it wasn't until I started looking more at the scripture in a contextual manner that I got to Romans 8:6 and was like, oh, well, this makes sense. To be carnally minded is death. Yeah. Thinking about my sickness, thinking about my illness, thinking about when the next time I'd have to take another stupid test is going to be, thinking about how this is, all that nonsense, that's the death. The spiritual minded nature is what? It's life, and it's what? It's peace. Robin Williams goes on the record of being, he's an atheist. He's an evolutionist. I mean, that's what he is. So I think it's safe to say Robin Williams went to hell. Right? Is that safe to say? Yeah. So now the question becomes, oh no, that's so heavy. Why do we have to talk about that? Mrs. Doubtfire? I mean, well, yeah, the movie's funny, whatever. I mean, I get what it is, but I've said it. I was talking to somebody about this today, though. It's safe to say it because I don't think there's one single time in the entire record he says he's got one thing he told Colbert about. I think it was Colbert. It might have been Jon Stewart, one of the two guys, or it might have been one of the night show guys. I mixed all those guys up. Anyways, he talked about heaven and hoping that again God was there and it'd be a big party and blah blah blah. He hopes it's real. Well, I guess the point in time where you reach suicide is where you realize that there is no more hope. And pastors were criticizing Matt Walsh and saying that it was a choice when it is a choice, and they blame it on do not try to mix mental illness with spiritual problems is basically what they're saying. I mean, what is most of life? A struggle for how you think? A struggle for the reformation of your mind? I mean, can't you get through a whole lot? How do SEALs do what they do? If I picked any of you guys off and said, let's go to SEAL training, or let's go do a SEAL mission right now, we'd all die, right? I mean, really, we would probably die if we did a SEAL mission. I mean, seriously, if we're like, dude, we're going to do a SEAL mission. We got to sit in this thing for 3 days. We get to sleep for 20 minutes. That's it. That's what the kind of stuff that they do. And then we got to swim underwater and do this crazy stuff. I mean, we would die, right? What do SEALs do? Seals get to this point in which they can do what? They can remove themselves from that element. And they get to a point in which they do what? They just have a different way of thinking and coping and getting through that type of approach. And so that's really what Christianity offers you in truth, is how Christ says, you should know the truth and the truth shall make you free. It does make you free in the sense that it frees these guys from the oppression of the law. He's showing them that, look, I'm going to show you the condemnation of it, but I'm going to show you the freedom from it. And then ultimately he shows them the freedom from the religion. But if we could convince people that, it's not... It's like this. Heath Ledger overdosed how many years ago, right? 5 years ago? Anybody still talking about that? No, everybody's forgot about that. Leonard Seymour Hoffman, he overdosed as well. Do we see a pattern here, right? Yet we all continue to go after the aspiration of being incredibly wealthy, as if for some way that's going to, accomplish the inner desire for you to be, satiated. It doesn't really work that way. So Matt Walsh, I don't agree with you on everything, but I have no problem with what he said. He killed himself. He made a choice. He made a choice to do that, and that's his choice to do it. And he'll be remembered, for making that choice. But of course, people making statements like, "Genie, you're now free." I mean, come on. People making statements like, what was the one I just read? Of course, anybody that ever says rest in peace is always very suspect to me. If you say rest in peace, you must not understand what lies beyond the grave. Okay, so it's not a scary thing for a believer. The believer has no fear, right? As John says, perfect love casteth out all fear, and the love of Christ is there for us. It's there for the whole world. Most people just sit there and reject it because it's foolishness and it's nonsense, and who can say you're right? And again, you have to force it out of your way of thinking. So I digress with that piece, but I just encourage you guys to remember that since the time we've been talking, it's probably been about, let's see here, 17 minutes. So if anybody want to do the math at 1.7 times 60 times now 18 minutes. Think about that. How many people die? A lot of people die, right? So let's not get into this position where we idolize a guy who for whatever his movies, Dead Poet Society, Mr. Holland's Opus, whatever. Yeah, they're interesting movies. Sure, they're cinema. Does it really matter? No. Okay. How does it affect you? If you let it affect you, that's pretty carnal. So I digress. So when people say right in the feels or this one really hurts, you know what? I'll tell you, dead honestly, it didn't bother me at all. It bothered me that he went to hell. Other than that, I didn't have any other, that's it. That's all I thought about. That's all I think about. When I think of somebody dying, I don't think about oh wow, I'm going to miss that guy's comedy. I think about, where does soul go, right? Is that how you guys think? Or am I the only one that thinks like that? Am I the only one that thinks like that, or do other people think like that? I don't think I'm crazy in what I'm saying. But I think the majority of Christianity doesn't think like that. They're like, oh, we just hope. I'll say this one other thing is that I think a lot of people won't discuss the gospel with other people, because when they discuss the gospel with somebody, there's a twofold problem that happens, right? Number one, if you discuss the gospel with somebody, there is the obvious discussion about, what about my X, Y, and Z who has died already, right? Isn't that an obvious thought process? What about X, Y, and Z? They've died already. What does that mean for them, right? So what's the answer? Well, I don't know that answer, and you don't know that answer at this point in time, but I will tell you that in either place that they are in, they would, number one, if they're in heaven, they would want you to be there. And number two, if they are in hell, they do not want you to be there, and they would implore you to make this decision now, right? That's Luke 16. Send back, let me go back and tell them. Send Lazarus. Send back anybody to go tell my brothers not to come here, right? Because that's the loving aspect. Now it's love to tell people about hell once you're in hell. I think everybody would say, don't come here, don't come here. You don't want to be here once they're there. So the second part of it is what? It comes on the person who's sharing the gospel, that when they share the gospel, if that person then rejects, there is now a certainty in their mind that they are going to hell, right? Don't you think that most people just want to just say, yeah, they're a believer. Yeah, they're saved. They're a member of the body of Christ. They say that. But then when you finally give them the gospel and they reject it, what do you then have to live with? You have to live with the understanding that you now know. I mean, it's solidified in your mind. This guy's rejected it. So now what do you do? Well, now you have maybe a more fervent desire to share the truth with him even more, right? It makes the legitimacy of their soul more real to you. Versus before, it's not as real. It's just kind of like, well, I'm just still in this hoping stage of, well, they were kind of like Catholic, and I don't really know. They went to church one time. They got baptized when they were 4. Whatever it might be, these little things that are helping you cope without having a discussion. Having a discussion needs to be on the forefront of your mind, and you have to, of course, be prepared to do that. But also, you have to be not just prepared to do it. You have to be prepared for what happens with it, the consequences of that. That is that mindset that you're going to know that person did reject, right? I mean, you don't think I've ever talked to people? I'll tell you, a guy I worked at a law office with, I sat for like 45 minutes outside the thing. I talked, and he says, we're really different about how you talk about this stuff, not like everybody else. And, I mean, it's intriguing. I said, what prevents you from making a decision? I just don't know. I said, I can tell you what prevents you from making a decision. You're 50 years old. And the longer you live, what's the problem with you? The more years you have to go, well, I was wrong all those years. Oh, I got to make a decision. Say, look, who cares about that stuff? If you're sitting in hell, you're not going to be thinking about that. I mean, you're going to be thinking about that versus if you're sitting in heaven, you're not, right? I mean, it's like, how is this such a difficult concept? And yeah, I've talked to a lot of people. I mean, I can tell you a lot of people that I know that I've talked to who are going to go to hell because they don't believe the gospel. But I've shared the gospel with them. I've talked to them, and they just don't care. Do I need to share it with more people? Well, yeah, of course. Do I take up every opportunity that I possibly have? No. What's partial some of the reasons? I don't have time. Get involved in the discussion, you go, oh, this is going to take like 8 years. And I got 14 other places I got to go. So I always think back to what Paul says, Timothy, no man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life. And it's a true statement. It does get really crazy. So I digress. So let's pick up in verse number 20 of Matthew chapter number 5. In Matthew 5, verse number 20, this is how Christ is making declarative statements, okay? These are declarative statements about what he has to say, right? This is not what the Pharisees say. This isn't what the scribes say. This isn't what anybody else has to say. This is what he has to say. And he says, for I say unto you, right? He said this before. He goes over here in verse number 18, for verily I say unto you. That verily part is something we have to pay attention to because anytime he uses verily, it's a word for truthfully, right? I usually say it in our vernacular, dude, man, I really mean it, right? No lie, right? Or as I used to say when I was a little kid, not pulling your chain, man. It's very 80s of me. But I'm not pulling your chain, I promise. He says, for I say unto you. Now picture yourself in this position. Jesus Christ has all of the Jews out there, a bunch of Israelites, a big multitude. They're all there. He's told them about what he's, doing. And he's looking at every single one of these guys, and they're all looking at him. All of these guys have grown up underneath who? Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, to a certain extent. Maybe they weren't super religious, but they know who those guys are, right? There's no doubt, we know who the Pharisees are. We know who they are, right? Versus the lay folk. And he says this, for I say unto you, now think about what goes through these guys' minds, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. What's on the forefront of all these guys' minds? The kingdom of heaven. They want to get in there. They want to be a part of the kingdom of heaven. Nobody's sitting there going like, kingdom of heaven, screw that, I don't want to go to that place. And everybody's like, yeah, this is it. I want to go. How is this going to happen? And so when he makes a statement here, this is one of the first statements Christ has about who enters the kingdom of heaven. The requirements. What are the requirements for the kingdom of heaven? You got to be righteous. Really? Yes. No unrighteous inherits the kingdom. Very clear. Look what he says in verse number 20 again. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness. So where's he putting the focus? Now remember, the cross has not been revealed. The dispensation of the grace of God has not been revealed. What they have known about righteousness is what? The righteousness of the law, right? That's what they've seen. They know what the righteousness of the law is. And they think that except your righteousness shall exceed. So what is that righteousness? That's the law, right? Deuteronomy 6 and verse number 25 says, if we do all of these things, it shall be unto us as our righteousness. When we do everything that the law says, it's our righteousness. So he's saying, unless your righteousness, now notice, is he talking about God's righteousness or Christ's righteousness? No. He says, unless your righteousness, do what? Exceed. Not just is the same. Dude, as long as you're good as the Pharisees, you're good to go. You're in. You're in. The Pharisees are in, you're in. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say the Pharisees are in. He says, unless your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall. Meaning, it's not going to happen. It's mandated. You shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's not possible. So what do they have to be thinking at that point in time? Okay. Well, that's a tall order to fill. There's 3 times in the scripture that are really three really good verses. This one here, the one with the rich young ruler where they say, who then can be saved? And then the other verse where they're talking where Christ is discussing again righteousness and what happens. And what do they say? They look at Christ and they say, are there few that be saved? Because what I'm looking at here, this is like really hard. This is really difficult. Who's going to, either number one, the belief aspect is difficult, but how they're also thinking, they're thinking, do we got to do all this stuff? See, what Christ is doing in this stage is giving them an understanding before, right? But what? What does he say? What does Paul say in Romans chapter number 3? He says, but now the righteousness of God is revealed, right? Being witnessed or manifest by the law and the prophets, right? Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto all and upon all them that believe, for there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. You know, you can start to see, okay, wow, Christ couldn't have been so much easier. Christ just comes up and says, hey, but now the righteousness of God is revealed. Hey, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, it's me. Couldn't you just done that? Wouldn't that have been a whole lot easier? Could just close the book up and just let it there? Can we just open the Bible and just make it say, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved, right? You are a sinner. See, but that wouldn't really benefit you. What you got to see is the full gamut, the full scope of the offense, and then the full pardon. That's what really the Scripture gives to you. It shows you the full, scope and offense, and it shows you the pardon. It also shows you the grace of God, and then it also gives you, the look of the character and the righteousness of Him. So when he says here again, you shall no case enter the kingdom of heaven, he's not joking. He's like, you ain't going to enter it unless your righteousness succeeds. Look at the book of Philippians, and we're not going to spend too much time here. Just look at Philippians 3 just for a second. See, Paul says this. Though I might, verse 4 of chapter 3, though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he have whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Okay? So what is he saying to you? He's saying in terms of the Pharisees, in terms of dudes who's got their act together, who do it and practice it, that's me. If you think you can hang with me, I can do it more. It's like what is the old Michael Jordan commercial? What does he say? What does he do? He says, I can do it better or something like that, right? Remember that? John, you remember it, Todd, right?
Larry Bird, right?
Yeah, it was Larry Bird. I can do it better, right? Whatever it is, I can do it better. That's kind of what Paul's saying. He's one-upping them. Oh, you think you have confidence? Read that again. If any other man thinketh that he have whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Who's he speaking as? He's speaking as a fool, right? Because the comparison of yourselves among yourselves is a stupid thing to do. I told Todd about this morning. I was sitting in bed the other night, and I said, so many people sit in bed, and they think about the fact that somebody is better than they are, right? Like, oh, that person's so much better. Like, I'm talking about generally speaking about the world. People think, people are better or whatever it is. Why don't you get to the point where, or they say, people are, I'm not as bad as this guy, right? That's the other word they say. I'm not as bad as this guy, or this guy's a little bit better. Why don't you start thinking the way Scripture says it, and that any comparison made in either righteousness or in sin is absolutely ridiculous because you all stand guilty, right? So if you all stand guilty, it's not like that guy doesn't stand guilty and you stand guilty, right? So that's the thing. If you're all guilty, what's the only thing left to do? The sentencing, as we've discussed. So it's a lie of Satan to get you to think that, well, you know, maybe I'm not really a believer. Maybe I'm not really saved. And if I'm not really saved, then maybe I'm going to hell. But maybe if I do good enough. See, the constant focus of Satan is to put the focus back upon you. And so what he does to the world is make people think, well, you're not as bad as so-and-so, so I'll be okay. Well, so that's the problem, is that in terms of the judgment, you may receive a lesser punishment for your sin. It's definitely true. Doesn't God reward every man according to their works? Yeah, he does do that. So what happens then? What do we have? We have a group of people who suffer worse punishment and a level of hell that's worse than those who don't. So people used to always say, well, so then you know, the Baptist one guy used to say, you know, Mother Teresa, you know, she's burning in hell. To which we have some discussion about that. But okay, so let's say Mother Teresa is burning in hell, right? People would say, well, she would have a lesser degree of hell. Well, that's contrary to the thought process, because technically, if she was doing all that stuff for her righteousness' sake, right? All that stuff is sin, right? It's not. It doesn't matter how much good you thought you did. You actually did a lot of sin, and you did a lot more to be contrary to God's righteousness. What I say to say that is that Paul is using the humanistic argument of, look, if you want to think that you have where to trust, I'm more. Look, there's nobody that's going to beat me. That's why he says right here, look at this. Circumcise the 8th day of the stock of Israel. So we did it the way it was supposed to be done. Of the tribe of Benjamin, which is a good tribe, you want to be part of Benjamin, right? Remember, Benjamin, Jacob had several wives, and the last one had Benjamin and Joseph, right? The last two. So those are like the special ones. They're the babies. They're the ones in his old age. And so the tribe of Benjamin, and Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, a what? A Pharisee. So we could, now of course, we can do this now. We have the benefit of the scripture. We can take this and go apply this to Matthew 5, right? And look at Matthew 5:20 again. And we can see him say, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall no case enter the kingdom of heaven. See, Paul makes it so much more clear in that he says he's not changing anything than what Christ is saying. He's clarifying it. And he's saying right here, look, if any man have confidence in the flesh, or if any man thinketh he have whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Because I'm circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, a tribe of the Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, is touching the law, a Pharisee. And look what he says in verse 6. Concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the what? Touching the righteousness which is in the law. And look at the words he uses. He uses blameless. Blameless before who? Who is he blameless before? Well, it can't be before God, because God could put a whole bunch of stuff on him, but in accordance to the law, what can he do? There's nobody else that can take him before the judge and say he did something wrong. Because if he did do something wrong, what did he do? He went underneath the law, he did the prescribed sacrifice for it, and he had the atonement for it. So as you see here, he says, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. Now look what he says in verse 7. But what things were gained to me? So this is what? A change of thinking. A change of thinking. At some point in time, somebody told Paul, that's a bunch of... I would use the word. He uses it here. It's a 4-letter word. It starts with S. Somebody told him, well, that's a bunch of dung. Somebody said that, right? He had to be convinced of that at some point. And it takes somebody who is what? Who wants to know the truth. It takes somebody that actually cares to believe it, right? The fool does what? Says, psh, hates wisdom. What does the wise man do? He receives the rebuke. He receives the reproof. He wants it because he desires to better himself, meaning he desires to come to the fullness of the knowledge of Christ, a full understanding of knowledge, or as Christ says, come to the knowledge of the truth. So when he says here, but those things were gained to me, what things were gained to me? Those I counted loss for Christ. And look at verse 8. Yea, doubtless, I count, what? All things but loss. And I love what he says here, because this is how I tell you it's a way of thinking. Where is knowledge? It's in your brain, right? He says, yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge. What now? The excellency of the knowledge? Yeah. I mean, we can go to Schoolhouse Rock. Knowledge is power. right? What is the Transformers? Knowing is half the battle, right? Transformer. Isn't that what the come on, Phil, you got to know this. Anybody know the Transformers slogan? Isn't it knowing is half the battle? Knowledge is half the battle. I mean, that's the intel. Intel is what you need. See, what he's saying here is he's like, all that stuff I did with the law, it's a waste of time. It's all a loss. It's loss. It isn't even like he's putting it in his back pocket. He says, I count them loss. Loss, as in it's gone. It's in the negative. Yea, doubtless I count all things but loss. And look what he says. I love it. For the excellency of the knowledge. Knowledge. I mean, will you guys think about that for a second? Knowledge. Why do you come to Bible study? I mean, think about it for a second. Are you getting knowledge here? Are you leaving with more understanding than when you came? I hope so. If not, either I'm not doing my job or you're not listening. One of the two. But he says, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things. Now he's saying in a not only in a spiritual sense that he previously thought, but also in a carnal sense. I mean, everything he had, his position, his power, his leadership, his authority, his rank, his accolades, all gone. I've suffered the loss of all things. And now what does he also say? Not only does he suffer them, but now he counts them, meaning he actually understands them to be that. He gets the realization that, look, and I do count them but dung. I love how he says that, because it can't be any more crystal clear. He doesn't say, I count them as little things I'll put up in my trophy room later. No, he says, that I may win Christ. See, what I say here is, it's not, people will say, that I may win people to Christ. That's not what he's saying here. He's not saying that I may win Christ, right? He's saying win and be, look at the word, win and be found, right? Win and be found. What is he looking at? See, I believe down deep that Paul did struggle with doubt. Because he goes like, man, it's just like, it's so unbelievable. Because when somebody's done so much wrong, when they've done so many horrible things, I mean, they can look at the grace of God and say, is it even possible? Me, of whom am less than least of all the saints, is this great grace given. Clearly he struggled with something if he says something like that, right? He's doing what? He's belittling himself. God never said he was the, what I'm saying? He's saying that, and God's saying, well, I'm glad you're seeing how much the grace of God helped you. Me, who am less than the least of these saints, is this great grace given. And he says, and be found in him, not having mine own righteousness. It's easy when you were used to following the law and trying to get your righteousness that way, right? To say, I'm going to keep doing that. Christ says that's not how it was and not how it ever was. And very clearly, not having mine own righteousness, which is of the law. So let's read Matthew 5, once at a time. That except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. And then while we're there, let's just look at Deuteronomy 6:25, and then we'll close. Look what he says. And we'll finish with the Philippians verse, but Deuteronomy 6:25. Look at verse number 24. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is at this day, and it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God as he hath commanded us. What are you getting out of the law? Can you get your righteousness out of the law? Yeah. But is that really what God's looking for? No. Because he's looking for either perfect obedience to the law, which is impossible. So once you say, well, that's unfair of God if he gave him something they could have never kept. Oh, he gave them a choice. Command them and then see if they agree. I mean, go back and read that. I remember we sat at that dining room table right over there and went through the law, for like 8 weeks. And went through every verse in Exodus, right? And then we went through every verse in Deuteronomy to show you all the other stuff and said, look, dude, look at how he did this. It wasn't like, here's the 10 commandments. Keep them, suckers. Bye. And he's like, peace out. I'll come back and I'll beat you up when you don't keep them. No, he gave them so many options, and they were pompous and arrogant. And he says, let's finish it off with verse number 9 of Philippians 3. He says, and be found in him, not having mine own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is what? The righteousness which is of God by faith. And look what he says in verse number 10. What's the knowledge? What's he love? The excellency of the knowledge? So when somebody says, oh, you just got a Bible study so you can get a big old fat head. Well, sure. About Christ. You know what I mean? How is that a bad thing? How is knowing more about Christ a bad thing? How is having knowledge about, whether it be the revelation of the mystery, about Scripture, about the prophets, the law, how is having any knowledge about God or Christ a bad thing, right? How could you penalize somebody for that? It's ridiculous. You can't. He says that I may know him, right? Know him. He wants to understand who he is. So anyways, we will really crank on hard through Matthew chapter number 5. And next week what we'll pick up with in 5 is we will be discussing what Christ says. Remember, he's making these declaratory statements. For I say, and then he's going to say, I say unto you, I say unto you, I say unto you. He's going to really hammer this hard in relation to how God sees the law. And next week we're going to pick up with circumcision and how really this concept of plucking your eyes out and cutting off your arms is a picture of circumcision. If the law demands perfect righteousness and adherence, and the reason why you can't keep it is because of your stupid eyeballs, then you better pluck them out because you're going to go to hell unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, meaning you're perfect. That's what he's trying to teach him. You need to be perfect. In the end of Matthew 5, he says what? Be ye perfect even as your heavenly Father, right? Even as your Father which in heaven is perfect. And every Baptist will tell you, that means maturity, folks. No, it doesn't mean maturity, okay? It means perfect. It means sinless in that context. Now, I can show you a lot of other verses, one of which is in Philippians 3, where he talks about perfect, right? In relation to knowledge, understanding, and maturity. We just read one in Colossians, right? That we may present every man perfect, right? In that regard of what he's saying there, there's no doubt in my mind that he's talking about sinlessness. Because that's the whole context of that passage there is sinlessness. The whole context of the passage there is righteousness. So we'll get into that some more. So we can close in prayer.